At a family dinner, my granddaughter whispered, "Grandma, don't drink the tea. Dad put something in it 10 minutes ago." I looked at my son, but he was already smiling. I pretended to drink the tea and, "I'm glad you're here with me. Please listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled." I used to think of my life as something small and steady, a rhythm built from grocery lists, morning walks, and the familiar creak of the wood floor in my old Michigan house. I was 59, retired from the library and living what most people would call an ordinary life. I liked the quiet. I liked my plants, my kitchen window, and the way sunlight crawled across my dining table every morning. I never needed much from anyone. My son Daniel, though, he had always needed more. More reassurance, more validation, more proof that he was in control of something. Growing up, he pushed boundaries because rules made him uncomfortable. As an adult, he hid that same discomfort behind polite smiles and careful phrases. My therapist once told me that some people don't grow out of their childhood patterns. They just learn to disguise them. I didn't want to believe that about my own son. But the older I got, the harder it became to ignore certain things. The first signs were small. A question here, a comment there. "Mom, have you ever thought about simplifying your finances? Do you really need the whole house? It must be hard to maintain alone. You know, we could help manage things for you." I told myself he was just worried. That's what adult children do. They fuss, they poke, they try to be involved. But there was an edge to it, a calculation. As if he wasn't really asking about my comfort, but about what I planned to do with what I had. Then came the conversation about my medications. He asked twice in 1 week whether I organized them correctly. Then he offered to take over sorting them, even though I'd been doing it without trouble for years. And when I said no, he smiled that tight smile of his, the one that meant he didn't like my answer. But I still brushed it off. I told myself I was reading too much into it. After all, my granddaughter Lily adored me, and Daniel seemed genuinely proud of how close we were. She was 12, bright as a spark, perceptive in a way that made me wonder what she saw that others didn't. Sometimes I'd catch her watching her father with a frown, as if she were piecing something together she couldn't yet name. A week before the dinner, Daniel had asked, too casually, whether I had updated my will. "People your age should think about these things," he said. "People your age." The words sat heavily in my stomach. Still, nothing prepared me for what happened that evening. It was supposed to be a simple family dinner. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, Lily's favorite blueberry pie. They came over around 6. Daniel brought flowers, though he never brought flowers. His wife Emily floated through the house making polite conversation, the kind that never touched anything real. Lily was quiet, too quiet. I should have noticed sooner. The way she lingered near me when I reached for the teapot. The way she kept glancing at her father, then at the floor. The way her shoulders tensed whenever he entered the room. Dinner felt staged. Daniel was overly cheerful. He asked about my health in a tone that felt rehearsed. He kept steering the conversation toward future planning, which made Emily shift uncomfortably each time. I tried to shake the feeling creeping up my spine. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was tired. Maybe this was what aging felt like, being unsure of your own instincts. And then it happened. We had finished eating. I stood up to clear the dishes and poured myself a cup of tea from the pot that had been steeping on the counter. It smelled faintly sweet, too sweet. I frowned, wondering if I had added extra honey earlier and forgotten. Lily brushed past me as I lifted the cup. "Grandma," she whispered, barely audible, her lips not quite moving. "Don't drink the tea." I turned toward her, thinking I must have misheard. But her face, the tightness around her mouth, the shine in her eyes, told me otherwise. "Why?" I murmured. She swallowed hard. "Dad put something in it. I saw him 10 minutes ago." I froze. Not the dramatic kind of freeze. No gasping, no shockwave rippling through the room. It was smaller. A breath held too long. A sudden stillness in my bones, the kind that comes when every instinct screams not to move until you understand what you're standing on. I looked at my son, and he was smiling. Not at me, at Emily, at Lily, at some joke he'd made a minute earlier. But the timing was too perfect, the smile too bright. Like he already thought he'd won something. I felt the cup tremble in my hand. Could this really be happening? Could my own child, my only child, be capable of something like this? Had I been blind for years? My mind raced, but my face stayed calm. I had learned long ago that panic is something predators look for. And in that moment, the horrifying question I couldn't shake was, had Daniel always been waiting for me to panic? I lifted the cup to my lips, tilted it just enough that it looked convincing, let the tea touch the edge of my mouth, but not enough to swallow a drop. Then I set it down as casually as if nothing had happened. Lily exhaled, shaky and quick. Daniel didn't even look up. Or maybe he did. Maybe his eyes flicked to the cup, satisfied, before returning to his conversation. Something shifted in me then. A quiet resolve. A knowledge that whatever this was, whatever he had set in motion, I could no longer pretend not to see it. I knew I had to act, but first I had to survive this dinner and pretend nothing at all had happened. I spent the rest of that dinner performing a version of myself I barely recognized. I laughed at the right moments, nodded along to Daniel's stories, even complimented Emily's new haircut. Anything to keep the room steady, anything to keep my heartbeat from showing in my eyes. Survival, I realized, wasn't always dramatic. It was often quiet, polite, invisible. But beneath the calm, something raw churned in my chest. Fear, yes, but also clarity. I understood something I had never wanted to face. My own son believed I was vulnerable enough to manipulate. Or worse. After they left, Lily hugged me so tightly I felt her trembling. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Yes," I lied. "I'm fine." She didn't believe me, but she didn't press. When the door finally closed, I locked it. Then I locked it again. I stood there in silence, hand still on the deadbolt, trying to breathe through the sudden heaviness in the air. The house felt different. Not unsafe, exactly, but altered. Like the danger hadn't come from outside, but had seeped in through people I trusted. I walked to the kitchen and stared at the teacup I'd left in the sink. A faint sheen clung to the inside, maybe from the honey, maybe not. I didn't dare touch it. Not yet. Not without knowing what it was. I thought of calling 911, but what would I say? My son smiled at me while I pretended to drink tea. Fear makes you doubt your own logic. Caution makes you doubt everyone else's. I knew I needed evidence, not just for the police, but for myself. I spent half an hour pacing the kitchen, listing out everything in my head. 1. If Lily was right, Daniel had attempted to poison me. 2. If he attempted once, he might attempt again. 3. If I confronted him directly, he might accelerate whatever plan he believed he was entitled to. 4. And if I did nothing, I might not survive the next attempt. By midnight, exhaustion set in. I sat on my bed, holding the phone in both hands. I thought of calling a friend, but what would I say? Most people don't want to believe a child could hurt a parent. They'd tell me I misunderstood. They'd tell me Daniel was stressed, overwhelmed, maybe depressed. Anything but malicious, anything but intentional harm. But I had seen the calculation in his eyes long before tonight. I had just pretended it wasn't there. I barely slept. Each sound in the house felt amplified. The shifting pipes, the branches tapping the window, the hum of the refrigerator. My mind kept replaying Lily's whisper, the urgency in her voice, the fear. By morning, I had a single thought that cut through the haze. If my own granddaughter felt compelled to warn me, something was deeply, dangerously wrong. I needed to understand the extent of it. I needed to understand the stakes. I spent the next day checking everything in my house. The pantry, the medicine cabinet, the drawer where I kept my daily pills. Nothing looked unusual, but the absence of evidence didn't soothe me. It only meant Daniel was careful. Around noon, I sat at the dining table and opened my old financial folder. Bank statements, insurance policies, my will, outdated documents, all of them. I ran my fingers along the edges of the papers and felt a pang of anger at myself. I had allowed too much to remain unprotected. Too many loose ends. Too many vulnerabilities. Had Daniel counted on that? I remembered his recent comments. How often he'd asked about the house, about my accounts, about future planning. I pictured him watching me drink that tea, waiting. A cold wave went through me. If Daniel had begun something, he wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. So I had to become someone he wasn't expecting, someone he couldn't manipulate. But first, I needed answers from the one person who had seen exactly what I hadn't, Lily. I texted her after school. She asked if she could ride her bike over. I told her yes. When she arrived, she looked smaller than usual. Nervous. She dropped her backpack on the chair and sat across from me, hands clasped tightly. "Grandma, I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," she whispered. "It's okay," I said gently. "Tell me what happened." She took a breath. "Dad. He looked around when you went to check the oven. Then he poured something from a little bottle into your cup. I saw him. I don't think he knew I was watching." "What did he do when he poured it?" "He stirred it, fast, like he wanted it to dissolve." Her voice trembled. "Grandma, I swear I didn't make it up." "I believe you," I said immediately. Her eyes filled with relief and something like guilt. "I don't know what's happening to him. He gets angry a lot lately, and he keeps telling Mom that you need help and that we should make sure you're not losing things." Losing things, becoming confused, becoming unreliable. A narrative. He was building a narrative. That was when the fear inside me crystallized into something sharper, a quiet, deliberate anger. If he was trying to paint me as incompetent, it meant he was preparing for something legal, something that required proof, something like control of my estate, my house, my decisions, my life. I reached across the table and held Lily's hands. "Thank you for telling me, but you need to promise me something. Don't confront him. Don't mention what we talked about. Stay quiet. Can you do that?" She nodded, small and scared. After she left, I sat alone in the dimming light of the kitchen, listening to the clock tick. Time suddenly felt both precious and dangerous. If Daniel was preparing to undermine me, I needed to act before he did. not emotionally, not impulsively, strategically. And so my first plan began to take shape. I would quietly, methodically secure every aspect of my life, my finances, my medical decisions, my legal standing, before Daniel could twist anything to his advantage. The first step would require courage and a level of secrecy I had never imagined needing in my own family. But what was the alternative? Waiting for him to try again? No, I wouldn't die politely. I wouldn't die quietly. I wouldn't die for someone else's convenience. Daniel had underestimated me. That was his first mistake. I wasn't going to let there be a second. I didn't act impulsively. Acting impulsively was exactly what Daniel expected from someone he wanted to portray as unstable. So the next morning, I did the most rational thing I could. I made an appointment with an elder law attorney in town, a woman named Margaret Vaughn, who came highly recommended by a retired judge I once knew from the library. The receptionist squeezed me in that same afternoon. That alone told me something. When older women call with urgency in their voice, the legal world listens, but not always for the reasons you'd hope. I drove myself there. Carefully, slowly, observing my surroundings, I kept replaying Lily's words, her fear, the way she had clung to me, and every time doubt tried to slip in, maybe you misunderstood, maybe it wasn't poison, maybe he's just stressed. I remembered Daniel's smile. No mother forgets the kind of smile her child gives when he believes the world is tilting in his favor. Margaret's office was in a restored Victorian house near the courthouse. Quiet, respectable, the sort of place where people whispered their fears behind closed doors. She greeted me in the lobby with warm eyes and a firm handshake. "What brings you in today?" she asked once we were seated in her office. I hesitated. The truth sounded absurd even in my own head, but absurdity doesn't make something untrue. "I believe my son is attempting to gain control over my estate," I began carefully, "and I believe he may be willing to harm me to do it." Her expression didn't change. Not shock, not disbelief, just focus. "Has he tried to file anything on your behalf? Any power of attorney forms? Conservatorship inquiries?" "Not that I know of," I said, "but he's been asking questions about my will, about my home, about my medications." Margaret nodded slowly. "That pattern is common. It's called anticipatory control behavior." "Is that a legal term?" I asked. "No," she said. "It's a human term." I almost smiled. Then she asked the question I was dreading. "Is there a specific incident that made you come today?" I breathed in. "My granddaughter told me he put something in my tea 2 nights ago." Margaret didn't flinch. "Do you still have the cup?" "Yes, in my sink." "Don't wash it," she said. "We can have it tested privately. The results won't be admissible in court, but they'll tell us if this is a health emergency or an estate emergency, or both." Those words, health emergency or estate emergency, settled in my mind like a stone sinking to the bottom of a lake. She then outlined the plan. Step 1, update my will, quietly. Step 2, establish a durable power of attorney and healthcare proxy, but not with Daniel. Step 3, secure my financial accounts with 2-step verification and trusted contacts. Step 4, document everything, every comment, every strange behavior, every witness. "And step 5, I asked. Her eyes darkened. "Prepare for the possibility that he may escalate when he realizes he's losing access." I felt by the time I left Margaret's office, the sun had dipped low, throwing long shadows across the parking lot. I drove home with a strange calm spreading through me. Not relief, just purpose. But purpose has weight, and that weight settled heavier when I saw Daniel's car parked in front of my house. He was early, unexpected, uninvited. He stepped out as I pulled in, smiling that same bright, rehearsed smile. "Mom thought I'd stop by. I called earlier, but you didn't answer." I forced a polite tone. "I was out running errands." "Errands?" His voice tightened. "Everything okay?" Was he already suspicious? Already nervous that I wasn't behaving the way he expected? I unlocked the door and stepped aside so he could follow me in. I didn't want him inside. My instincts recoiled, but refusing would spark immediate tension. And I wasn't ready for that yet, not without preparation. He wandered into the kitchen and immediately looked at the sink, at the teacup. My heart gave a single sharp thud. He picked it up casually, too casually. "Want me to wash these for you?" He wanted to destroy the evidence. "No," I said quickly. "I'll do it later." He paused, just a subtle hitch, but it was enough. Then he set the cup down exactly where it had been, but with a stiffness that betrayed irritation. "So," he said lightly, "what errands kept you busy today?" I smiled. "Just sorting out some paperwork. You know how it is at my age." The words were bait. I wanted to see how quickly he would bite. He straightened slightly, eyes sharpening. "What kind of paperwork?" "Oh, the usual, financial, legal, boring things." He studied me, not with the eyes of a son checking on his mother, but with the eyes of a man calculating whether someone was getting ahead of him. Then his voice softened. Too soft. "Mom, if you're making any changes to your will, shouldn't we talk about it as a family?" There it was, the confirmation I didn't want but needed. He was expecting a change. He feared a change, because he had plans that required me silent, still, compliant. "I haven't changed anything," I lied smoothly. "And if I ever do, I'll let you know." I watched the relief cross his face, and then the confusion. He couldn't tell if I was being honest, and uncertainty, I realized, unnerved him more than confrontation. He stayed only another 10 minutes. Chatter about nothing. Questions wrapped in charm. Subtle attempts to peek into my mail pile, my notes, my desk drawer. When he finally left, the house felt breathable again. But the silence didn't last long. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "Dad's in a weird mood. Keeps asking if you said anything today. Did you?" I stared at the screen. Daniel was already probing, already sensing that something had shifted. The emotional temperature in the house had changed, and predators, I realized, smell more than fear. They smell resistance. I typed back, "No, I didn't say anything, but thank you for telling me." Then I walked into the kitchen and stared at the teacup. I placed it carefully in a Ziploc bag, sealed it, and hid it in the back of my freezer, somewhere he'd never look. That was my first real step, the first irreversible action, the point where fear became strategy. It was also the moment I finally accepted the truth. Daniel wasn't confused, overwhelmed, or misguided. He was intentional, and intention is far more dangerous than desperation. I wasn't imagining anything, and soon I would have proof. The next morning, I woke up with a kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years. Fear was still there, quiet, steady, pulsing beneath my ribs, but now it moved with purpose. It wasn't panic anymore. It was awareness, a sharpened instinct, a refusal to look away from the truth of my own life. My first task was simple, but symbolic. I changed every password I had: banking, email, medical portals, even my cloud storage. Daniel was tech-savvy, and if he suspected I was making preparations, he might try to help by monitoring things that didn't concern him. It took almost 2 hours. When I finished, I sat back and felt something surprising. Relief. Small but real. I had taken back a piece of control. My second task was harder. Margaret had arranged for a private lab to pick up the teacup that afternoon. A man arrived in an unmarked car with a clipboard and sealed evidence bags. He didn't ask questions, just cataloged the item and handed me a receipt. "It'll take a few days," he said. A few days. A few days in which Daniel could make another move. A few days where silence could be dangerous. But I told myself, one step at a time. I spent the rest of the morning gathering documents. Birth certificate, house deed, my pension files, insurance policies, everything. I spread them out across my dining table and went through each as if searching for cracks. Around noon, while reading through my homeowner's insurance, I heard a car pull into the driveway. My stomach tightened. I wasn't expecting anyone. I peeked through the curtain. "Daniel!" He got out of the car with a sense of purpose that made the hairs on my arms lift. He wasn't smiling, not this time. His jaw was tight, and he carried himself like a man ready to apply pressure. I considered not opening the door, but that would provoke him too early. I needed to stay a step ahead, not start a war on the front porch. So I opened the door. "Mom," he said, stepping past me without waiting to be invited. "We need to talk." That was the tone he used when he wanted control, not conversation. I followed him into the living room. "What's going on?" I asked. He turned to me with an expression carefully arranged into concern. "You've been distant, strange. Lily said you seem stressed. Emily said you sounded odd on the phone yesterday. Is something wrong?" So he was gathering information, testing the perimeter. He didn't know what I had done, but he knew I'd done something. "I'm fine," I said, "just busy." "Busy with what?" His eyes flicked to my dining table, the documents still laid out in neat piles. I could almost see the calculations running behind his eyes. Wills, policies, accounts. He recognized the papers. He stepped closer. "Mom, you know you can tell me things, right? If you need help managing—" "I don't need help managing," I said quietly, firmly. "I'm capable of handling my own affairs." His expression cracked, just a hairline fracture, but enough to glimpse the frustration beneath. "Why are you being like this?" he asked. "You've been confused lately, forgetful. Maybe you don't see it, but other people notice." There it was again, the narrative. "Daniel," I said softly, "I haven't forgotten anything." His jaw tightened. "Then why are you reorganizing everything without talking to me? Why are you shutting me out?" He wasn't hiding the possessiveness anymore. It leaked through each word. "Because it's my life," I said, "and my responsibility." He exhaled sharply and moved to the dining table. His eyes landed on my old will, the unupdated version I'd left out deliberately. He picked it up, thumbed through it, scanning. "You were going to tell me if you made changes, right?" he asked. I watched him, calm but alert. "Of course." He set the will down with a bit too much force. Then he stepped closer, too close. "Mom, I just want what's best for you." It wasn't a statement. It was a warning. Something in his voice had changed, lower, colder, threaded with impatience. I held his gaze. "I know what's best for me." There was a long silence. Daniel looked at me the way someone looks at a piece of machinery they can't get to work, frustrated, impatient, resentful, and under it all, afraid. Afraid of losing control, of losing access, of losing whatever plan he had crafted in his head. When he finally spoke, it was through clenched teeth. You're making things harder than they need to be. And you're pushing harder than you need to, I replied. That did it. His composure broke. He took a step back, rubbing a hand over his face. Fine. If you're going to act like this, then don't expect me to fix things when they fall apart. I never asked you to fix anything, I said. His eyes narrowed. Maybe you should have. He left without another word, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. I stood there, breathing slowly, letting the tremor move through me and then fade. The house was quiet again, but not peaceful. Daniel had crossed into a new territory, aggression with a veneer of concern, a tactic meant to confuse, destabilize, guilt, and frighten. He had revealed his hand more clearly than he intended. He knew something was shifting. He could sense resistance, and he was escalating. I needed to protect myself, not tomorrow, not next week, now. So I spent the next 3 days finishing every step of Margaret's plan. Updated, will signed and secured. Power of attorney assigned to a trusted friend from my old library days. Someone with no ties to Daniel. Bank accounts locked down with multi-factor authentication. Copies of documents stored in a digital vault. And then, when everything was finished, I collapsed into my armchair and allowed myself to breathe for the first time in days. A strange quiet washed over me. Not safety, not comfort, but relief. A pause. A moment to collect myself before the next inevitable storm. I didn't know when Daniel would push again, but I knew he would. Predators always test the fence twice. For 3 days after Daniel's visit, the house felt like a held breath. Nothing moved out of place. No unexpected knocks. No suspicious cars slowing down in front of my driveway. Just quiet. But quiet can be deceptive. Quiet is often where manipulation begins. On the morning of the 4th day, Daniel switched tactics. He called me at 9:30. His voice was soft, unusually warm, so warm it raised every alarm inside me. "Mom," he said, "I've been thinking. Our last conversation. I didn't handle it well. I'm sorry." Daniel didn't apologize. Not unless he needed something. I held the phone tightly. "What made you say that?" A short pause. Then, "I hate fighting with you, and I know you've been feeling overwhelmed. I shouldn't have added to your stress." There it was, the bait wrapped in affection. "I'm not overwhelmed," I said calmly. I know. His tone was gentle, soothing. But we all have moments, especially when we're dealing with complicated things. Complicated things, a phrase that could mean anything and nothing at the same time. "I was thinking," he continued, "why don't I come over tonight with dinner? Just something simple. We can talk, reset, maybe laugh a little, like old times. Like old times, as if the past week could be erased with pasta and a smile. I recognize the strategy. When pressure fails, charm comes next. It's a common tactic among people who want control. They retreat, soften, lure you into a false sense of comfort, then strike again once you've relaxed. "Not tonight," I said gently. "I have plans." "Plans?" he asked too quickly. "With who?" I didn't say with someone, I said plans. Silence unfurled across the line, a measured, calculating silence. "Okay," he said finally, "let's talk tomorrow then." "We'll see," I said. After I hung up, I sat down at the kitchen table and closed my eyes. I didn't feel fear anymore. I felt alert, grounded, present. Daniel's attempt at charm told me one important thing. He wasn't sure of his footing. He sensed the shift but didn't yet know the extent of my preparations. That uncertainty was my temporary shield. But shields don't last forever. I needed support, not emotional validation, strategic support. Someone who knew Daniel, who understood my personality, and who could tell when something wasn't right. The first person who came to mind was my old library co-worker, Cindy Grant. She was 63, sharp, fiercely loyal, and had an instinct for spotting manipulation a mile away. She'd seen plenty of broken families and twisted inheritance battles while working with estate lawyers over the years. I called her around noon and asked if she could meet me for coffee. She agreed immediately. When I arrived at the cafe, a small, quiet place on Maple Street, Cindy was already at a corner table with 2 steaming mugs. She looked up and studied me for a long moment. "What's going on?" she asked gently. "You only look like that when something's very wrong." I sat down. The chair felt cold, grounding. "It's Daniel." "Of course it is," she murmured. "Tell me everything." So I did. Not the dramatic version, not the version soaked in fear, just the facts. The tea, Lily's warning, Daniel's probing questions, his sudden shift from aggression to charm, and the legal steps I'd taken. Cindy didn't interrupt. She didn't blink. When I finished, she let out a slow breath. "Good," she said. "You're doing the right thing." "You don't think I'm overreacting?" I asked. She leaned forward. "Overreacting? Honey, I've seen people do far worse over far less. Money turns some children into strangers. Control turns them into enemies." The word enemies rang in my chest, but it didn't frighten me. It clarified things. "What should I be watching for?" I asked. 3 things, she said, holding up her fingers. 1, sudden concern about your mental health. 2, pressure to sign things you don't fully understand. 3, any attempt to isolate you from other people or professionals. I swallowed. "He's already tried the first 2, and he'll try the 3rd, she said, "especially once he learns you've taken legal steps he didn't approve of." I felt a low tremor of dread, but it didn't overtake me. "What do I do?" She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You don't do this alone. I'm here. And if he comes to your house unannounced again, you call me or the police. Do you understand?" I nodded slowly. I hadn't realized how tense my shoulders were until they loosened under her words. For the first time in days, I didn't feel alone. After we talked, I drove home feeling steadier. The world looked different. Not safer, but more navigable. Daniel's shadow still hovered, but it no longer seemed impenetrable. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something small but unsettling. A business card tucked into the crack of my front door. I stepped forward and took it. It was the card of a local geriatric care manager, someone who assists families when an elderly person can't manage on their own. On the back was Daniel's handwriting. "Mom, I found someone who can help take some pressure off you. Just think about it." D, a chill moved down my spine. This wasn't an offer. It was a warning wrapped in courtesy. A reminder that he was preparing the narrative. My mother can't take care of herself. I went inside and locked the door behind me. The click of the deadbolt felt heavier this time. Heavier but necessary. I placed the card in a folder labeled Documentation, the one Margaret had told me to keep updated every day. Daniel was shifting again. Charm hadn't worked. Soft concern hadn't worked. So now he was testing a 3rd tactic, external pressure posing as help. But for the first time, I didn't feel shaky in the face of his manipulation. I felt steady, cold steady. His pressure wasn't breaking me, it was clarifying him. That night, I turned off my phone and sat in the quiet darkness of my living room. The house felt like mine again. Not safe exactly, but claimed, grounded. And as I sat there, I made a promise to myself. I would not let Daniel define the narrative. I would not let him rewrite who I was. I would not let fear guide me. Only strategy. He thought I was softening. He thought I was doubting myself. But he had no idea how deeply I had settled into resolve. He was watching, waiting, planning, and I was ready. Daniel didn't come the next day. That alone made me uneasy. When manipulators retreat, it's rarely surrender. It's recalibration. I knew he was thinking, circling, planning a new approach, and I knew the charm phase was already wearing thin. On the second day of silence, I found myself checking the windows more often, listening for cars slowing down outside. The house felt like a stage where the lights hadn't come up yet. Dark, expectant. On the third day, I woke to the sound of knocking. Not pounding, not aggressive, soft, rhythmic, a pattern meant to disarm. I wrapped my robe around myself and went to the door. Through the peephole, I saw Daniel, hands in his pockets, head slightly bowed, the posture of someone who had rehearsed contrition in the car. I opened the door only a few inches. "Morning, Mom," he said gently. "Can we talk?" You would never guess, looking at him, that this was a man who might have poisoned his own mother. That was the danger. People rarely recognize maliciousness when it's wrapped in politeness. "About what?" I asked. "About us." He smiled, small and earnest, and about clearing up any misunderstandings. I didn't step aside, but I opened the door a little more. He took that as an invitation and walked in. I noticed immediately he had brought nothing. No food, no flowers, no pretext. He had come only with intention. He chose the living room and sat while I remained standing. A power move, but I let him think whatever he wanted. "Mom," he began, "I think we've gotten off track. Things have been tense, and I don't like tension between us." I folded my arms. "Then stop creating it." He blinked, surprised by the bluntness. The charm cracked for a moment before he smoothed it over. "I'm not creating anything," he said carefully. "I'm trying to help. You've been stressed. You've been making choices without talking to me or Emily. We're worried." "Worried," I repeated. "Concerned, overwhelmed, confused. You choose different words, but they mean the same thing." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said slowly, "that you're trying to control the narrative about me." His jaw twitched, a tiny betrayal of emotion he didn't want to show. "Mom," he said, his voice softening again, "I think you're getting the wrong idea. Nobody wants to control you." I simply watched him. Silence unnerved him more than accusations. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, mimicking empathy. "Look, I know things have been difficult since you retired, and it's normal to feel insecure about independence as you get older." I cut him off. "I'm not insecure, I'm aware." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. His eyes narrowed ever so slightly, realizing I wasn't going to follow the script he'd prepared. He tried again. "Mom, you're dealing with complicated paperwork, legal stuff, financial decisions. It's a lot. Let me help you. That's all I've ever wanted." "Is that why you contacted a geriatric care manager?" I asked softly. He stiffened. His breath hitched, almost imperceptibly, but I saw it. "I just thought it might take some pressure off you." "It wasn't for my benefit," I said. "It was for your case." His mask cracked. "My case?" he repeated. "What case?" "The one you're preparing," I said, "to prove I'm incompetent." His eyes darkened. He wasn't pretending anymore. "You're being unreasonable, and you're being transparent." The silence stretched, thickened. "This isn't healthy," he said finally. His voice had cooled several degrees. "When older adults start becoming paranoid." "Daniel," I said sharply, "don't finish that sentence." He pressed his lips together. The room felt suddenly smaller, warmer, as if his anger altered the air itself. He stood. "Mom, you're making choices that could hurt this family. You're acting like I'm the enemy." "You made yourself the enemy," I said quietly. His nostrils flared. "Is that what you think of me now? After everything I've done for you?" It was a familiar tactic, pulling the ledger of sacrifices, real or imagined, to guilt me back into compliance. "Tell me," I said, "what exactly have you done for me?" He stared. His mouth opened, then shut. He hadn't prepared for that question. "I'm your son," he said finally, weakly, as if that alone entitled him to ownership. "That doesn't give you rights over my life," I said, "or my decisions, or my future." He stepped closer, too close. "Mom, listen to me." "No," I said calmly, "I won't." His face hardened. The softness evaporated. "You're making a mistake," he whispered. "A big one." "I've made mistakes before," I replied, "but not this time." He exhaled sharply through his nose, like someone restraining himself. "You know, if you keep pushing me away, people will start to wonder why. They'll wonder if you're okay. Threat, not even veiled." "Let them wonder," I said. He stared at me, searching my face for fear, doubt, weakness, anything he could exploit. But I felt none of it, just a steady, cold determination. He stepped back finally, anger simmering just beneath the surface. "Fine. If you want to do this the hard way, we'll do it the hard way." He walked to the door, paused, looked over his shoulder. "You're going to regret this." "Maybe," I said, "but not today." He left. The door slammed hard behind him, rattling the walls. For a moment, the house shook with the echo of his fury. And then, stillness. I stood there, breathing steadily. Was I afraid? Yes, a little. Because when someone like Daniel loses charm as a tool, they turn to pressure. And when pressure fails, they turn to force. Social, legal, emotional, sometimes physical. But beneath the fear was something stronger. Resolve. What frightened me no longer paralyzed me. It fueled me. Daniel had shown his real face, and I was done pretending not to see it. Daniel didn't come back for 4 days. 4 long, heavy, expectant days. I knew the silence wasn't peace. It was preparation. Predators don't retreat. They wait. The house felt different during that time. Still mine, but no longer neutral. I moved through each room with awareness, touching the edges of tables, flipping light switches, opening and closing curtains with a deliberate calm. I wanted to remember the feeling of the place before it changed again. On the 5th day, the call came. It wasn't Daniel, it was Margaret. Her voice was steady, but her words landed like stone. "The tests came back." I sat down slowly. "And?" "There were traces of zolpidem in the residue. A sleep medication. Powerful, fast-acting, dangerous in the wrong dose." My mouth went dry. "Enough to harm someone?" "Enough to sedate you heavily," she said. "And if combined with other medications you take, yes, it could have been dangerous." I closed my eyes. Even though I already suspected it, hearing confirmation still felt like ice settling in my chest. "Margaret," I whispered, "my son tried to drug me." There was a long pause before she answered softly, "Yes, and now you have proof. Unofficial, but proof." nonetheless. This changes the trajectory. Trajectory, the polite word lawyers use to describe a path toward conflict. What do I do now? I asked. Prepare, she said. He will make a bigger move soon. You need to stay ahead of him. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat in silence, staring at the pattern in the rug, feeling something shift deep inside me, something steady, cold, unmovable. It wasn't fear. It was clarity. The next morning, Daniel returned. He didn't knock softly this time. He pounded on the door, each hit vibrating through the frame. I didn't open it immediately. I let him knock again and again. Let him feel the imbalance, his urgency against my stillness. Then, slowly, deliberately, I opened the door. He stood there with a stack of papers in his hand. His face was flushed with anger, but he was wearing a smile. Tight, controlled, trembling at the edges. "Mom," he said, "we need to talk now." I didn't step aside. About what? This. He shoved the papers toward me. I didn't take them, so he pushed them into my chest. A petition for temporary guardianship. My entire body went still. "You filed this?" I asked softly. "I initiated it," he corrected. "It's not filed yet, not officially. I wanted to talk first, to give you a chance to cooperate." Cooperate? As if he were offering me mercy. "What grounds?" I asked. "That you're struggling," he said. "That you've been making reckless decisions. That you're isolating yourself. That you're paranoid." Paranoid, the word he had been inching toward for days. "You had this prepared in 4 days?" I asked. He didn't answer. His silence was the answer. My cold certainty solidified. "You've been planning this for weeks," I said. He exhaled sharply. "Mom, stop being dramatic. I'm being accurate." He stepped forward, lowering his voice to a rehearsed softness. "Listen, this doesn't have to get ugly. If you just sign the voluntary version, we can avoid the court hearing altogether. Voluntary guardianship. Signing away control of my life. Giving him everything he wanted. So this is the plan," I said quietly. "You poison me. You gaslight me. And when that doesn't work, you try to take my rights." His eyes flashed with something dark. "You're twisting everything." "I'm seeing everything," I said. The mask slipped. Anger cracked through. "You're going to ruin everything for yourself if you keep fighting me," he snapped. "Do you even hear yourself? You sound unstable." Unstable. The narrative he'd been building. "Daniel," I said, "I know what you put in my tea." He froze. For the first time since this began, he truly froze. Color drained from his face. His mouth opened, but no words came out. His chin twitched, a small, uncontrolled spasm betraying the panic underneath. "That's not," he stammered. "It was Zolpidem," I said, "tested privately." He took a step back. You tested it." "I did." "You're lying," he said, but his voice had shifted. Higher, thinner, cracking like old glass. "I know what you did," I said, "and I know why." He shook his head, stumbling over his own breath. "No, Mom, no, it wasn't like that. You weren't supposed to..." "Weren't supposed to what?" He swallowed hard. "Mom, just sign the papers, please, before this gets worse." There it was, desperation. The moment predators lose control, their entire structure collapses. "No," I said. A single word, steady, calm, final. He stared at me, wild-eyed, stunned by the simplicity of it. "No?" he repeated. "You can't just say no." "I can," I said, "and I am." He stepped toward me, invading my space. Mom, if this goes to court, you're going to embarrass yourself. You're going to look paranoid and senile. I'm trying to protect you from that. You're trying to protect your claim, I said. His mouth twisted into something ugly. If you think you can fight me in court, you're delusional. I won't be the one on trial, I said quietly. For the first time, true fear flashed across his face. Not fear of me, fear of exposure. I stepped back and rested my hand on the door. Leave, I said. You can't make me. Leave, I repeated, or I call the police. His eyes widened. The police? Are you serious? Yes, I said. Very. He hesitated, rage and panic warring behind his eyes. His breath was shaking, his hands trembling, his control slipping. Then, in a burst of anger, he threw the papers onto the floor. They'll believe me, he hissed. Not you. Maybe, I said. But they'll look closely, and you can't hide what you did. His face contorted, fear, fury, humiliation all twisting into something sharp. Then he turned and stormed out, slamming the door so violently a picture frame fell from the wall. I picked up the papers calmly. My hands didn't shake. The fear inside me had changed shape. It wasn't terror. It was conviction. Daniel had shown everything. His plan, his desperation, his breaking point. And now I knew exactly how to defeat him. After Daniel stormed out, the house shook for a few seconds, then settled back into silence. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This one felt like a doorway, a moment between what had been and what would come next. I locked the door, picked up the guardianship petition he had thrown on the floor, and spread the pages across my dining table. The arrogance in the paperwork was staggering. Every accusation was framed as concern, confusion, forgetfulness, instability, none of which had any basis in reality. He had planned this carefully, but he had made one fatal mistake. He underestimated me. I gathered the papers, placed them into an envelope labeled documentation, and called Margaret. She picked up on the second ring. You're calling earlier than expected. Something happened. I told her everything. The petition, the confrontation, the threats, the way he'd panicked when I mentioned the Zolpidem test. There was no gasp, no shock on her end, only a tightening of tone. It's time, she said. We go on record. Meaning? I asked. Meaning we file first. I closed my eyes, steadying myself. What exactly are we filing? An affidavit outlining coercion attempts, potential chemical incapacitation, and an attempted fraudulent guardianship claim. And we file a notice that any petition Daniel submits is contested. The words delivered a strange kind of empowerment. I had spent weeks fighting in silence. Now I would fight in daylight. I can come in today, I said. Come now. The law office felt different this time. Not ominous, not intimidating. It felt like shelter, like stepping inside a place where truth had walls. Margaret ushered me into her office and spread out a clean stack of forms. Tell me every detail, she said. We need precision. So I did. Slowly, carefully, step by step. The T, Lily's warning, the private test, the charm, the anger, the petition. All of it. She didn't interrupt. She wrote quickly, her pen clicking softly across the pages. When I finished, she looked up. Are you prepared for this to escalate? She asked. I'm past preparation, I said. I'm ready. We signed the affidavit together. She notarized it. She sent it electronically to the probate court with a timestamp. Then she leaned back, exhaled, and said, Now we wait. Daniel didn't make me wait long. At 4:30 that afternoon, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. Mrs. Carter? Yes. This is Officer Reynolds with the County Sheriff's Office. Your son has filed a welfare concern regarding you. We're required to conduct a brief check-in. Are you available now? I almost laughed, not from humor, but from recognition. He was still trying. Even after the confrontation, even after the fear, he was accelerating. Yes, I said calmly. You're welcome to come by. When I hung up, I felt no panic, just resolve. 10 minutes later, 2 officers stood at my door. One spoke, the other observed. Your son said you've been acting erratically. The officer explained gently. We're not here to intrude, just to verify you're safe and capable. Of course, I said. Come in. I showed them the house, clean, organized, tidy. I answered every question clearly, unhurriedly. I even offered them tea, which one politely declined, the other accepted with a nod. When they asked if I felt unsafe, I told the truth. Yes, but not from myself. I handed them a copy of Margaret's affidavit. Their expressions changed immediately, sharper, more alert. You said this has already been filed with the court? This morning, I said. They read faster. The older officer closed the folder and said, Ma'am, do you feel threatened by your son? I feel targeted, I said. Manipulated, pressured. He nodded. If he attempts to come here again in an aggressive or coercive manner, call us immediately. We'll document it. Then the younger officer added quietly, You're doing the right thing. When they left, the house felt sturdier somehow, as if its foundations had thickened with each official stamp of recognition. I wasn't alone anymore. My truth had witnesses. At 7:12 p.m., Daniel finally called. I let it ring twice, then 3 times, then 5. Finally, I answered on the 6th ring. His voice was shaking with contained rage. You filed against me. I filed truth, I said. You think this is going to protect you? He snapped. No court will believe you. They already do. He faltered. I could hear the air catch in his throat. Shock, disbelief, fear. What? He whispered. I'm no longer alone in this. You're lying. I'm not. There was a long silence. 10 seconds, then 20. Then he inhaled sharply, the sound of a man realizing the ground beneath him had shifted. You've ruined everything, he said hoarsely. No, I said softly. I've protected everything. The line went dead. The next day, Margaret called with an update. The guardianship petition he started, it's been flagged. The court wants a formal interview with him, not with you. I exhaled slowly, letting the relief pass through me, not cling to me. And the affidavit, I asked. It's been attached to his case file permanently. Permanently. The word felt like a closing door. Not on me, but on him. Then Margaret said something that chilled me and freed me at once. His actions now have legal consequences. Not emotional, not familial, not theoretical. Legal. He had crossed a boundary he couldn't uncross. 3 days later, Daniel tried one last maneuver. He showed up again, but not with charm, not with anger. This time he arrived with Emily. She stood behind him, eyes wide, frightened, exhausted. She had finally seen enough to be afraid. Not of me, but of him. Daniel spoke first. Mom, can we please talk? I didn't open the door. No, I said. Emily stepped forward. Please, I think you should hear. Emily, I said gently, take your daughter and leave him. That's the only conversation worth having. Daniel bristled. You have no right. I have every right, I said. He lunged toward the door, but Emily grabbed his arm, voice shaking. "Daniel, stop!" He pulled away, but not completely. For the first time, she held him with more strength than he expected. She had seen him lose control, she had seen the truth, and she was done pretending too. "Let's go," she whispered. "This isn't working." "It will," he insisted. "It will if she—" "It won't," she said firmly. "Not anymore." He froze. The fear returned. But now it mixed with something else. The awareness that the narrative had slipped beyond his reach. He wasn't winning. He wasn't controlling. He wasn't convincing. He was exposed. I watched them go, Emily pulling, Daniel resisting, their silhouette shrinking down the driveway until they were out of view. Slowly, I closed the door. And for the first time in weeks, when the lock clicked, it didn't sound like fear. It sounded like victory. After they left, Emily pulling Daniel down the driveway, his voice rising in protest, the house went quiet in a different way. Not an anxious quiet, not the tight silence of waiting for the next blow. This quiet felt earned, deserved, almost gentle. I stood by the door for a long time, fingers resting on the lock, absorbing the stillness. My heart wasn't racing, my hands weren't shaking, my breath wasn't shallow. Everything inside me had steadied. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't bracing for something. I was simply standing, and I felt present. I slept that night without the constant awareness of footsteps, knocks, or phone calls. My dreams weren't peaceful yet. My mind still worked through the pieces, but they weren't nightmares either. The danger was no longer immediate. It had been forced into the open, and once truth is visible, its power changes shape. In the morning, sunlight spilled across the kitchen table, warming the wood. I brewed coffee, not tea, and sat down to look through my plants. I trimmed brown leaves, rotated pots, touched the soil. These small routines had always grounded me. Now they anchored me again. My new life didn't come with dramatic triumphs. It came with small ones. Closing a drawer without fear, opening mail without dread, hearing the phone buzz and not jumping. But some changes were not small. Within days, the legal system began to move. Margaret called on Wednesday with a tone that almost sounded like satisfaction. "The court denied his preliminary petition," she said. "They saw your affidavit, reviewed the circumstances, and flagged his filing as potentially malicious." Potentially malicious. The polite legal phrasing for what really meant. He overplayed his hand. He misused the system. He got caught. "What does that mean for him?" I asked. "It means he'll have to explain himself formally," she said, "and the judge has the right to open an investigation into his conduct." "A legal investigation?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "Not criminal, yet, but administrative, procedural, and ethical. If he tries to escalate, it could become worse." I sat back in my chair, letting the information settle. "What about me?" I asked softly. "You're safe for now," she said, "and you're protected. Legally, structurally, financially. You made the right moves at the right time." There was something validating in that. Not triumphant, just steadying. After I hung up, I felt a shift inside me. Not relief, but the slow return of self-trust. For weeks, I had doubted my instincts, questioned my perception, wondered if I was overreacting. But I had been right. Every step, every suspicion. Sometimes survival isn't about strength. It's about listening to the quiet warnings inside you and believing them. Lily visited that afternoon, riding her bike up the driveway with cautious hope in her eyes. I stepped onto the porch before she even knocked. "Grandma," she said breathlessly, "Dad's been weird, quiet, but not scary. Just like he's scared of something." "He's facing consequences," I said, "real ones." She nodded slowly. "I told Mom everything I saw, everything I heard." "And?" I asked gently. "She believed me," Lily whispered. "Of course she did, because children rarely lie in the direction of danger. They lie to avoid trouble, not to create it." Lily's truth had cracked something open in Emily that she could no longer ignore. We sat together on the porch swing. She rested her head on my arm. "Are you mad at Dad?" she asked finally. "No," I said honestly. "I'm disappointed, I'm sad, and I'm careful, but I'm not mad." "Are you scared of him?" "I was," I said, "not anymore." "Why not?" "Because he lost his power when he lost his secrecy." Lily nodded as if she understood that better than someone her age should have to. "Grandma," she whispered, "I won't let him hurt you." My heart tightened. "You already protected me. You did something very brave." She smiled, small, quiet, proud. When she left, the house didn't feel empty. It felt anchored. 2 weeks passed. Daniel didn't come by, didn't call, didn't text. Emily, however, reached out. Gently at first, then steadily. She wasn't asking for reconciliation. She was asking for clarity. She wanted to understand the full scope of the situation. She wanted to protect Lily. She wanted to separate her own fears from Daniel's narrative. She invited me to coffee one morning in a neutral place, the same cafe where I'd spoken to Cindy. She arrived looking tired but resolute. "I need to know everything," she said. So I told her, calmly, plainly, no embellishments. I described the tea, the testing, the petition, the threats, the officer's visit. By the time I finished, she was pale. "I suspected something," she whispered, "but I didn't know it was this deliberate." Deliberate, the right word. Intent leaves fingerprints. "What do you want to do?" I asked softly. She looked down, twisting her wedding band. "Protect my daughter and myself." I didn't push her, but later that week I learned she had spoken to a lawyer of her own, and the next week she moved out. Daniel tried to block her, tried to shout, tried to intimidate, but he was weakened. His credibility fractured, his behavior documented. He couldn't control the narrative anymore. As for me, my life took on a new simplicity. I attended a gardening class at the community center. I reconnected with a book club I'd left years ago. I had lunches with Cindy, walks by the lake, quiet evenings with my knitting basket beside me. Peace didn't come dramatically. It came like dawn. Slowly, then all at once. The fear in my home dissolved. The tension in my body untangled. The pressure in my chest lifted. I wasn't naive. I knew danger leaves shadows. Daniel might try again someday, in some new form. But now, everything was recorded. Everything was known. Everything had consequences. He had lost. His narrative, his secrecy, his leverage, his confidence, his family's trust, his moral ground. And I had gained something far more valuable than victory. My autonomy, my clarity, my peace. I tended my plants. I cooked small meals. I watched the seasons shift. I lived. And each night, I locked my door not out of fear, but out of habit. Not because I had to, but because I could. If you've stayed with me through this story, then you already know one truth. Danger doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it grows quietly inside your own home, wearing a familiar face. And now I want to ask you, honestly, directly, what would you have done in my place? Would you have seen the signs? Would you have believed your instincts? If this story made you think, if it made you look at family, trust, or boundaries differently, let me know. Share your thoughts. Leave a comment. Join the conversation. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe and stay with us.